Hello, I'm Simon, and welcome back to the Bookster podcast from inside the SaaS holiday rental software company Bookster, based in Edinburgh, Scotland. Follow along as Bookster discuss their inner workings and their journey to where they are today. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that these conversations are insightful, but ultimately helpful. Today, as always, I'm joined by Robin Morris, co-founder of Bookster. How are you, Robin?
Good morning. Yes, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm a little bit warm in this little booth, but I'm all right apart from that.
Good. And we're also lucky enough to be joined by Adam Arran. How are you, Adam?
I'm good, thanks.
Good. Can you maybe just give us your job title again, explain a little bit what you do at Bookster for those of you who haven't listened for a while?
Yeah, I am the support lead at Bookster. Most of my job is onboarding new clients, but also day-to-day support, so answering tickets, chats, that sort of thing.
Great, thank you. Right, well, today's topic, gentlemen, is going to be, in the nicest possible way, what do clients do wrong? In your opinions, of course. So maybe, Robin, I don't know if you want to start us off with something that you get frustrated at or whatever with your clients, or what you want to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's a bit unfair to criticize or go after our clients. Feels like a slightly silly move, to be honest. Now that I think about it, but I suppose
We should have invited some clients on here to
defend
as rebuttal.
themselves. Yeah. But I suppose what's interesting is that people do tend to do similar things that we think are counterproductive to their own success, and it's just interesting to discuss it and see that might ring true with some clients who might be listening or people running other types of software SaaS companies. So yeah, for example, for me, a little bugbear is that they don't. So when you use Bookster, you need to fill out all your property information. So descriptions and things like that. We then sync across to Airbnb, Booking.com, Verbo, etc. And for some reason, clients they just don't always fill that information in, even though they are syncing up to these channels. Or on photographs, they don't title their photos or put descriptions. Now, some of that might be we might be a little bit to blame in terms of the usability of Bookster, etc. But for some reason, it is something that people are just, once they've uploaded the photos, they just leave them. And so, yeah, they don't describe them or add content, etc. I mean, and the other thing is when you look at a lot of these photos that people put up, they're not professionally taken holiday home photos. It's just taken with your camera, your phone camera, etc. So I would say that around just basic content, property content, that's a massive area where our clients need enormous encouragement and pushing to get that right, and just to literally go in and add details to their properties.
In terms of, sorry, Robin, interrupted you there. But in terms of the photograph sort of meta data, I guess, what is it that doing that brings to the booking or the why do it basically?
Well, if you leave IMG 0484 or whatever, that shows up on maybe your Bookster Instant website inside Airbnb. So it looks a bit odd, but also it doesn't. Those are keywords that people search for. So Google will pick it up on your website. So if people searched for holiday home in Caithness with hot tub, if you've got a photograph of a hot tub and you've labeled it hot tub and you've said, here's our hot tub looking out over these wonderful views of Caithness, you've got a much better chance of coming up in search because you've labeled that photo, and then Google might show the photo and you might get a click through. So yeah, it's partly to do with search engine optimization, partly to do with when someone's viewing your property, it's not going to help in terms of converting to a booking if they see this IMG, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And finally, for people with, maybe visual impairment or whatever, if they've got something that's, a screen reader that's reading the page, it may not be able to interpret all the photos. I mean, although AI is now starting to be able to do some of that, it's still the case that a screen reader is going to look at the title and description of a photo and show that or read it out to someone that maybe has visual impairment problems. So there's accessibility issues there too. So there's kind of a whole bunch of reasons why it's a good idea to make sure that's updated.
Just to touch on accessibility, people often mistake accessibility for disabled people or disabled users. Another massive reason to make your site accessible is if you think of a search engine as a disabled user, or they are literally blind, your accessibility is going to help index the content. So there's no bad reason to do it. There's only good reasons to do it.
So yeah, so for the client, it might seem like a tedious sort of thing to have to type in names of all their pictures, but it's
I
actually
don't know that
worthwhile.
it's tedious. I don't know if it's tedious. I think they just don't think about it.
Right.
They don't. And as Robin said, maybe it is our fault a little bit in our UIs. Maybe we should be forcing that on them a bit more, or maybe they should be listening to our podcast, and then they'd know.
Well, the other one you did is good. Is that right?
The time it takes is not that much, and if you think of how would, if I were blind, if I were a search engine, how would this be helpful? And it's kind of self-explanatory.
Okay, that's good to start with. Adam, have you got anything that sort of you get annoyed at or frustrated at, perhaps?
So generally, from an onboarding perspective, there's a very specific set of tasks we have to go through that will generally take around an hour. It's very counterproductive if the client goes into that meeting hyper focused on just details of something specific to them, rather than the general, we need to get Bookster set up so that it's working, because there's certain things that just need to be in place before we cover the details, and the details are much easier to get sorted once that initial structure is in place. So I'd say a mix between impatience or not willing to maybe go with the flow of the onboarding process. We found that it's really, really important to do that initial onboarding. So either saying, "Oh, I'll do it myself and get back to you whether I need anything," or I want to focus on this particular detail rather than all the settings you need to go through to make sure they're working for me.
Must be quite tricky, though, I guess, to obviously you can understand that a client is more concerned with their particular details than the general sort of look of it, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a question of, like, we will get round to the details, and chances are we'll probably cover them during the onboarding anyway, in a way that answers the questions you may have. I'd say about 90% of those questions are answered during the onboarding process, just naturally, with the information you're setting up and filling out, you'll sort of naturally come round to the things, versus if they immediately go on, I want to make sure I want to see what the emails look like, or I want to see what it looks like from a guest's perspective. It's like, well, you know, if your payments are all inaccurate, we're going to be emailing inaccurate emails asking for payments. So let's get that sorted first. And there's a certain amount of, you just need to trust us, and you need to like let go of the control for a minute, because we will guide you in what we have determined from statistically. We've done it lots of times. We know what the issues generally are, and if we don't cover your specific issue, you will have time at the end of the process, to certainly ask, and we'll certainly cover that then. But you're starting from a much better place if you've got the foundational, I guess, Bookster skills in place before trying to tackle anything complicated or specific.
So you want them to let Bookster see the bigger picture, I guess, and it'll all be fine.
Well, let them see the bigger picture, and if that doesn't cover their specific questions, by all means, let's go into the details. But let's not start out without covering the bigger picture first.
Yeah. And are there any examples or any occasions when you think, I mean, you've said about the photos missing descriptions, but any other sort of missed opportunities that clients might miss because they're just not aware of, or they don't want to do it a certain way?
Yeah, I think one thing that comes up quite often is someone has had one little bad experience on a channel. So like, for example, on a booking.com or something, where maybe they've had a bad guest, or maybe they couldn't get through to booking.com's support or help or something like that, and then they just sort of refuse to be listed or to go on to that channel. So yeah, I think that what can happen there is, rather than sort of just saying, right, okay, well, I've had a couple of bad experiences, but I'm just going to give them a few more chances and see if I can build up a bit of authority in that channel and get some bookings, see if I can get momentum. Sometimes people sort of do write off a channel and what tends to happen is they do that for quite a long time, and then eventually they kind of give in and go back onto it, when really they should just say, look, just maybe one or two bad experiences isn't representative of everything. And once you've got yourself set up correctly and you understand how people are expecting you to interact with them, then things can move a bit more smoothly. So yeah, so sort of having knee-jerk reactions to certain channels can be a kind of obvious, I think, a mistake.
I think you touched on something there. Knee-jerk reactions, not just to channels, to anything. Like that's a really bad strategy in general. To have, if you take a moment to just take a deep breath if something goes wrong, rather than having a knee-jerk reaction, and that goes for channels, but it goes for so many other things as well. I think that's a really good point, is to not just react, but to stop, breathe, think, and then react. And you're in a much more calculated way. You're much more likely to cause other problems with a knee-jerk reaction that's going to make your life much more difficult and much harder to get out of. It's like quicksand. It's making you sink rather than doing something in a strategized way.
Yeah, I mean, an obvious example of that is, so say you put your property on in January, but you only have availability in July and August, September. Thinking that you're going to get bookings for those months that are 6-7 months away is quite unreasonable, because actually, as the time of booking approaches, the chances of getting a booking basically go up. And in fact, over our time running Bookster, there has been a trend towards later and later bookings, but not sort of more and more last minute bookings, as it were. But you might be, listed your property for a month or 2 months, and not really be getting very much, or listed a few properties and not be getting that much, but it's because your availability isn't available until further into the future. So from a guest perspective, they'll probably come and book 4 weeks in advance, 6 weeks in advance or something. But if you're not waiting till that 6 weeks, then your chances of getting bookings are lower. And yeah, you do get people knee-jerk reacting to that. They go on for a couple of months and then, oh, I'm not getting anything, there's some massive problem, right? I'll take all my properties off, or I'll take a property off, or use a different channel or whatever, or maybe blame us. I don't know. But being patient and understanding when you're most likely to get a booking is quite important as well.
And then from Bookster's point of view, I mean, how much stay, I guess, or sway do you guys have with a client to say, well, look, just hang on, stay on booking.com, whatever, for another few months or whatever? I mean, do you have the ability to say that to clients, or how does that work? If they decide to
we
leave,
can say it. We can say it. They can do what they want.
Right. Okay.
We will always give friendly advice when asked. But we ultimately we're a tool. They're using the tool, so it's ultimately their decision.
Mm-hmm.
We can give them some broad data and say, across our client base, this is how far in advance people book. So we could give them some feedback on that front. I suppose this also leads in potentially to that sometimes they think of us as more of an agency when we're not. We are just a tool. We're a software tool. Mm-hmm. And so we don't necessarily know what your prices should be. We don't proactively promote your properties, as in, we're not going and updating your property for you and doing some of that work that you really need to do yourself, because we don't know about your property. We don't know what the things are that are nearby that are attracting people to the area or to your property, or etc. So we're just making sure that your property is synced up, that the prices are correct, that you've got a website that's running, you're able to take bookings, etc. But we're not giving you advice on what your prices should be, or what are the things that might specifically work for you. And I think it's quite a difficult line, really. Even for us, it's quite a difficult line, because people will ask us our opinion, on onboarding or support or whatever. And sometimes we will give it because, we're humans. So, but it sort of then strays outside of the boundary of what might be we perceive as our role a little bit, where it's like, well, do you think my prices are too high? Is a question we asked. I don't know. I'm not sure. And there isn't really a right or wrong answer to that, possibly anyway. And so, sometimes we get asked for advice, I suppose, that is not within our really our knowledge, or what we're offering to our clients, really.
It must be quite frustrating at times, though, with your experience and your knowledge, to see a client perhaps not do the right thing in terms of your experience, and not to be able to say, well, hold on, don't do that, because you're going to get more bookings if you do that. There must be times when it's frustrating for you guys, I would imagine.
I mean, for the things that come to mind for me is trying to game channels around the policies. Like, for example, if you've got you've got a bad review, rather than respond to the review, which comes across as human and you're a reasonable person, you delist and then create a new listing. and then get banned from the channel and then get no bookings. And it's like, if you just responded to the review and kept your listing, you know, you're fighting against the grain of how that channel works by not doing that. There are if you're constantly turning your listing offline and online again and doing that sort of thing, the search algorithm on the channel is going to probably punish you and stick you lower down because you're not as reliable a client for for their clients, the guests. So fighting all that stuff constantly when you think you're getting ahead of it is actually counterproductive. If you just take a little time to stand still and observe what's going on around you in your particular situation. Okay, you got a bad review. So if put yourself in a guest's perspective, not take yourself out of your owner's shoes or property manager's shoes and put yourself in the guest perspective. If you're reading a bad review but you then got 10 other good reviews, it might actually come across that the guest is being unreasonable. And in which case, it's like, allow people, give them the benefit of the doubt that they will be able to come to that conclusion. If you're doing a good job, it will generally, come through anyway. If you have a guest that is literally, the guest from hell, it will come across in their review if they are being that way. And people are smart enough to know the difference. If you consistently have, the shower was smelly, then maybe do something about the shower. But if it's literally, the guest was like, oh, there was a party, across the road, well, that could have been a one-off. You could respond, yeah, we've actually had a conversation with that neighbor, and they realize that, people are sleeping, and they've agreed not to do it in the future. And it's like, okay, that shows that you're being proactive. And all the while, you have not taken your listing offline, so there's still chances of getting bookings. Whereas if you just like, just do the most drastic thing possible, yank the plug, you're gonna cause yourself a lot more work, and it's not to your benefit to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Norman, do you have anything to add on that one?
I suppose. Things that feel when you first start up your property business, if you're new, things that feel like are quite dramatic or disastrous, like a bad review. You might. But it's probably worth paying attention to, say, someone like Adam's reaction, because he might be like, "Oh, right, okay, that's fine," because he's seen it, hundreds of times. So, yes, it's probably worth gauging the reaction of something that's gone wrong, off our reaction to it. If you receive a payment and it's £10 less than you expected, or something like that, when your pricing isn't quite, you've set your prices, you thought you were going to get £1,000, but you get, 950. That's something to learn from, rather than just go, oh, this system's not working, or
Cancel the booking.
Don't cancel the booking.
Don't cancel the booking.
Don't cancel the booking. Canceling the booking like that is really a bad idea.
It's a bad idea from the guest's point of view. It's a bad idea from the if you're on a channel that you've cancelled, the channel's going to treat you badly, because you treat the guests badly. So don't put yourself in the guest's shoes rather than, I'd say, the number one thing I could recommend to clients as far as where they go wrong, not to put themselves in our shoes, but to put themselves in their guests' shoes. If they can do that, then chances are they're gonna do things right.
Yeah.
Treat others like you like to be treated yourself, I guess, is the key thing.
Exactly. As you say, all your servants.
Pretty much.
So, I mean, we're sort of over already, but I just want to keep going a little slightly, because I'd like to bring up the topic of chat GTP and other things like that. How do you guys feel about their sort of, or the input of AI, I guess, to what you guys are doing?
Adam, what's your view?
I'd say in the beginning, it was, when it first came out a couple of years ago, and you get people just doing a brain dump of, whatever this thing is it's got intelligence in the title, so I'm just gonna trust it. I think we're coming slightly around to it's settled a bit, and people are actually finding, okay, well, this is a good use for this tool. This is not. So they, are using it in the appropriate places. I would say, in terms of the where do clients go wrong with it? They just automatically trust it because a computer said it. I would just don't take off your critical thinking hat when using those tools. They are just tools. Don't just blindly trust it that it's correct. It's going on a statistical model. It's not actually intelligent, at least not yet. So take what it says with a grain of salt, and actually read through what it's recommending you do, if that's what you're asking at, rather than just blindly doing it and blindly following along.
Yeah, always check what it's told you. You might be using it to see, right, okay, generate a description of my property, or what are things that it can do nearby this particular location, or something like that. Or so these models tend to be quite good at quite static information, but not so good at more dynamic information. So, like if you said to it, what events are happening near me in next month, it might not work so well. But they generally, as Adam points out, they do hallucinate things, and so it's quite dangerous to sort of say, generate a description and not read through it, because it might well come up with stuff that's just not true.
Or focus on things that aren't important, like the picture of the living room with the plug coming from the lamp going into the socket. Nobody cares. Read it. Take that bit out if it's not relevant to to the guest experience.
Yeah, so that's where they might go wrong if they were, if they are using these tools. They should be pretty careful. I mean, we're using some of these tools inside Bookster a bit already, or not already. AI's been around a while, but obviously, and we use it for coding a bit too, and we're using them, but you do have to be very careful about what it comes out with. Make sure you're double checking that information. Just use with care.
Use with care. No, fair enough. And I guess that might be the same. Do you guys have experience of dynamic pricing? Is that something that you guys deal with at all?
Yeah, so we have dynamic pricing kind of built in.
Right.
But again, I would say, it follows exactly the same thing. So, I always say to our clients, use it as a guide, a kind of seasonal guide. You may want to charge more, you may want to charge less, but it will take account of seasonality. The very nature of holiday rentals is they do tend to be different to each other. So it's not like a hotel where you've got 50 rooms, and you can take a signal from, someone books 3 rooms, or not someone, 3 people maybe book 3 different rooms. And then, it happens very quickly. And then the dynamic pricing can respond and say, well, there's demand here, so I'm going to push the prices up. That doesn't happen in holiday rentals. So you've got a unique farmhouse. So how do you know whether a price should go up or down? Well, properties around, you can maybe say they go up or down. So there might be a good signal in terms of seasonality, or maybe events perhaps. But what it won't get is the uniqueness of that property. So it's just going off other properties round about, but they might all be, small cottages with 2 bedrooms or 1 bedroom. If you've got a farmhouse with 6 rooms, if that's the only farmhouse with 6 rooms within 10 miles of where you are, the dynamic pricing might not really be able to fully understand or to give you a price that is correct, correct, is reasonable. So, yeah, with dynamic pricing, where our clients tend to go wrong is they can take it as gospel. And it's kind of a bit like, exactly like Adam said with AI, because a computer said it is true. And then because they tend to be knowledgeable in that area, so they'll look at the prices and say, oh, this is a load of rubbish. Why are you even offering this? But it's very difficult for us to explain to clients, look, it's quite a good guide. You can increase your prices, you can decrease your prices, but you can use the dynamic prices as a baseline. But we're not saying these prices are gospel truth, that's what you should use, but that's perhaps down to the way we've implemented our UI as well. Perhaps we should be, saying price guide or seasonal guide or something. I don't know. Maybe there's ways of.
No. This episode was all about blaming the clients.
All right. Yeah. It's all about.
Yeah.
And one last thing I wanted to say as well, actually, is what we can get quite a lot of are sorts of PMS hoppers. So people that hop between different systems, and it's not just that they're coming to Bookster and leaving because they don't like a bit of it or don't like it. These are a certain mindset of type of person. Now it could be just as they're in this discovery phase, but what happens is someone, say they are using a different bit of software and they spot that Bookster does something that they like. So it's like, oh, Bookster has instant websites. I need an instant website. Right, I'm going to move away from this other software to Bookster. And then they're like, oh, but Bookster doesn't have this thing that I was using.
Or it does have this thing, but it does it in a slightly different way.
Yeah, it does it in a different way. Oh, I don't know. I had a guest book generating software that worked in a certain way on this other software. Why don't you have that? And it's that they'll move because of one bit of functionality, but forget that their existing platform does a whole load of stuff that they just assume will be in the other bit of software. So you get people leaving and then coming back because they're like, oh, I was tempted away to this other thing because it did this, but it doesn't actually do all the things that Bookster did in the way that I really like. Or alternatively, they come from some other bit of software and they say, oh, you guys have, an instant website, so that's why I came, but you don't do this or you don't do that in the way that I'm used to. So I'm going to cancel and go, and then they sort of constantly hopping between different bits of software because they're looking for something that does everything exactly the way they want, rather than saying, right, okay, I accept that this bit of software doesn't do everything exactly the way I want. So, I'm just going to, go with the flow. I think
that comes back to, so I think that comes back to not going against the grain. In general, you need to, whatever software you're using, whether it's Bookstore or something else, you need to kind of be willing a certain amount to just go with it and see where it takes you. If there's something that is a red line, then by all means, switch product, go to something where that red line isn't crossed for you. But in general, everything's going to be a compromise somewhere because it's an opinion at the end of the day. It's we've coded it in a certain way because we have an opinion.
There's actually,
it's not going to be. Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say that this is possibly for a topic of another podcast, but the likelihood is that what AI will allow people to do is use a platform like Bookster's APIs and fill in those gaps, do some of the functionality in the way that they do want it to work. So they might use, Bookster for everything really, but then they might want their own analytics tool or their own dashboard or something, and they want it to work in the way. And actually, the bar for creating those types of tools is a lot lower now than it was before. So yes, you want the kind of solidity of the pricing being correct and it's syncing up to the channels and doing a lot of the stuff that you want it to do, but you might actually, what we will find, I'm sure, as time goes on, we've already had a bit of it already, but you'll find people saying, oh, actually, I want to do X or Y or Z, and they're just going to write it themselves using AI to do a certain little thing that kind of scratches an itch for them. And, as long as we've got a nice, well-documented open API, then they can do that and they can get the information out the way they want or push information in the way they want.
It's a brave new world.
Well,
indeed.
Well, I'd definitely be up for discussing that on another episode.
Yeah.
Good. Right. Well, that sounds like that's a good place to leave this episode. We have run on a bit, but sorry, it's my fault. But it was an interesting conversation to carry on a little while. So thank you both for your time for that. We will be back soon with another podcast and potentially about AI, and that'll be an interesting conversation as well. So for the meantime, Adam, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
And Robin, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
And we will see everyone very soon, and take care. Bye-bye.